Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. When I first started treatment for my alcohol and drug use, I was under the impression that once I figured out how to get alcohol and drugs out of my life, all would be good, life would be perfect, and I'd just sail through the rest of it without any problems. What I quickly learned is that the real issues that I needed to address as part of an ongoing lifelong recovery program had less to do with alcohol and drug use and more to do with the way I related to and interacted with the world around me. Tommy Rosen talks a little bit about this in his book, Recovery 2.0, and I'm going to read some about it today. He starts off by saying, addiction is fueled by an underlying state or condition of dis-ease. Please note that I have hyphenated the word dis-ease to bring your attention to the main characteristic of addiction, a lack of ease in your life. In the state of addiction, you lack ease, or put another way, you are distant from ease. The point of recovery is to close the gap between you and ease. Now, this really means a lot to me, and it makes a lot of sense to me because when I was in my addiction, life seemed to be a fairly consistent and constant struggle. There were periods of time where things seemed to be fairly easy and things seemed to be going okay. But looking back, even during those times, I wasn't ever really truly happy with the way things are going, and I never truly felt content. There was always an underlying dissatisfaction with what was happening in life, usually a dissatisfaction with the way I was living it, because I knew that the way that I was using drugs and using alcohol was not helping me out, was not helping my family out, and was causing problems with the way that I interacted with the people in the world around me and the way that I was treating myself. So even during times in my life when things were going okay, there was still not a lot of comfort and contentment with life. And so he goes on to say, if you struggle with drugs, alcohol, or other addictions, you certainly did not begin with those problems. You may have been trying to hide from one of the four aggravations. Just as a reminder, the four aggravations that he's talking about were covered in yesterday's video. He states they are negative thinking, self-doubt, procrastination, and resentment, and these are the four thought behaviors that he feels really drive a lot of addictive behavior. He goes on to say the four aggravations intensified, and at some point you developed a regular need for your chosen medicine to fix how you were feeling. Enjoying the results that drugs and alcohol produced, you concluded you had found the right medicine for you. Ironically, you may have been correct for a spell, except that no medicine can be considered truly healing if its effects do not automatically render it obsolete in a reasonable amount of time. So, if you are taking a medicine for something, you should be able to cure that thing with the medicine so that you don't have to use it forever. Now, I know there are some exceptions to that, some very notable exceptions to that, but that's the idea he's talking about here. In other words, if you smoke pot because that's your chosen medicine when you were 15 years old, but then 2 or 4 or 20 years later, you are still smoking pot, you might need to inquire as to the effectiveness of that medicine. So we can argue the merits of marijuana all day long. I can tell you from my own experience with it that I did use it without much consequence for a long period of time. And I didn't think it was a drug that really caused many problems in my life. I didn't feel like I used it the same way I used alcohol to address some of the insecurities that I had. But once I removed alcohol from my life and spent a few years just relying on marijuana as my medicine, it became quickly clear that the problem wasn't the drugs I was using. It was the fact that I was using drugs at all in order to address the dis-ease with which I confronted daily reality. And I had to get to the root of that before I could fix anything else in my life. It's a snake that eats its own tail. If you try to fix your problems with drugs and alcohol, you're going to create more problems, which leads to more drugs and alcohol. And things just keep going in a circle. And that's what I did for about 2 decades of my life. Once I got into recovery, I realized the reverse is true. In order to truly address the problems that I have in life with the dis-ease that I have in life, I've got to avoid using alcohol and drugs. I've got to stay abstinent. And then that allows me to do the continuous lifelong work I do to address the other issues in my life in order to approach a more content and place and to live life with more ease. And so it becomes really important for me to abstain, but that becomes less of the work over time. Over time, my work turns into how do I address, for example, the four aggravations? How do I deal on a daily basis with my propensity to engage in negative thinking, procrastination, self-doubt? How do I deal with those things? And for me, the program of AA has taught me different methods to deal with those things. Going through cognitive behavioral therapy has taught me different methods, and then continuing to read more about other methods of dealing with those kinds of emotions and feelings has helped me develop a more robust way of handling the things that I used to use alcohol and drugs for. And so these days, I accept that alcohol and drugs had a huge contributing factor in some of the biggest problems that I've encountered in my life. And I also accept, though, that even if I get to a point where I'm able to handle life with relative ease and where I'm able to have a little bit more control over some of the things that used to vex me, have a little bit more intuition, for example, in the way that I handle the world around me, I could never go back to using alcohol or drugs. Abstinence has to play a role in my lifelong journey of recovery because without it, I don't have the space I need in life to address my other problems. But staying sober becomes less of a concern. I don't wake up in the morning and think, how am I going to manage to make it through today sober? That's not a thought that typically comes to mind that often. I have not faced challenges now. I've only been completely sober for a little over 2 years now. So I'm still very, very early on in this journey. But I have not faced too many challenges where I thought, how am I going to make it through this without getting messed up? How am I going to make it through this without drinking or smoking? And part of that is because I have made doing the other work of recovery such an important and consistent part of my daily routine. So there's a lot we can address about what does that work look like. That's the whole point of programs of recovery like AA, like Recovery 2.0, like Refuge Recovery, Smart Recovery. That's the whole point of those programs, is how do we design a way to live so that you're not spending every day just white knuckle trying to make it through the day sober, and instead that becomes just a part of the way that you take care of yourself and allow yourself the space to live a life with the ease that everybody deserves to live life with. That's it for today. I'll be back tomorrow with more.